All right. Well, welcome everybody, whether you're here or watching asynchronously. I'm kind of excited to do this. Let's see here. Maybe gallery makes more sense. Um, there was a lot of people signed up, and I'm really excited about this. I just wanted this to be a place for helping parents that needed advice, whether they needed inspiration, they needed mentorship, a sounding board, someone to still their wobbles. Because I know when I started off, we had jumped right into unschooling, and I kind of needed someone like that. Um, I have the time. I feel like I have, some of the experience, some of the skills. Hopefully, what I offer is helpful for everyone here. And that being said, my advice is an offering. It is not prescriptive. I'm not an expert. Keep what resonates and release what doesn't. Okay. Um, yeah, there were quite a few. Oh, right. So, depending on whether or not you've submitted something or you're just here to listen in, I would say listen to everybody's questions and my suggestions, my brainstorming, even my questions that come up, because I think quite a few of these can be generally applied. Um, yeah. And then I said this already, but I think it you know, it's helpful to say again, the more I know about your situation, the better. The more I can individualize what I'm offering, my help, my inspiration, etc. So feel free to share more if you are live today. Otherwise, I'm going to keep everything anonymous. I'll read kind of the questions that you've shared with me, um, and then yeah, it'll stay anonymous. So the format is I'll kind of go back and forth between live and previously submitted questions. So at this point, stay on mute until I ask for live questions. If you're looking for more of a conversation, feel free to provide that feedback. You have my email, daniel.t.muller@gmail.com. I sent it out. Um, I think a conversation there's good sides and bad, like ups and downs for both possibilities. Sometimes, in my experience, the best answers arise in conversation. Because people feed off of each other. It sparks an idea where someone has another idea, et cetera, et cetera. And like I had just said before hitting record, I'll be recording this and I'll be sharing it out to everyone. I'll throw it in the next email and I'll have the recordings on my YouTube channel. They'll be public at this point, but again, I'm open to feedback moving forward. Um, so I do have at this point one person in attendance. I could either jump in with some of the questions that have already been placed, but I am open to Taga. If you feel like you have something that you want to share at this point, feel free.
Okay. Um, a little bit about my situation would probably help. I have a son that is 16.
Hmm.
When he was 15, he started high school. He lasted about 3 months. He had a full-time para with him. He lasted at 3 months, and then we started to have a lot of outbursts, and the school didn't seem to be able to be flexible. He was also having trouble with sleeping and waking up for school.
Hmm.
So he ended up not even attending most of the freshman year of high school. So then the following year, I was like, we can't keep going like this. So I found this amazing online school.
Okay.
Well, he's never been a computer kid or self-directed. So I can't school. I work full time from home.
Yeah.
So I can't be his teacher during the day. And then in the evenings, I'm pretty cashed out, and then he's wanting to be, outside, or he's potentially sleeping depending on the day. So we struggled with the online school. They were awesome, and then worked with me in the state that I live in to be able to do a project based
Okay.
curriculum. So that was great. And we were excited about that because he wants to build this little cabin. And so we were going to do that. But unfortunately, he's been in burnout. So
Mm,
I, so I guess my largest concern and my biggest concern is, and I've been trying to talk to other people about this as well. Like he's basically 100%. There's two thought processes in my mind. When you say unschool, um, they're either 100% not doing any work towards, an education, or it looks different. So in my case, we tried the looks different model, and then now we're basically 100% unschooled. But how long? I mean, I know you can't answer this because every child's different,
hmm
but maybe like statistically from what you've seen, do kids do they tend to want to return? I mean, that's my bigger concern is that he's going to be unschooled for so long that he's like, and no interest to go back. But they need a foundation and at least a high school diploma to be able to do other things later in life.
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I feel like Taga, did you also submit a question via like the form?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's similar to that question. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, perfect. All right. Um, yeah. Yeah, what's coming up for me? So your unschooled definition, explain to me kind of a little bit more of like the looks different that you're kind of using. Explain that a little bit more for me.
Well, I meet with a PDA therapist, and
Hmm
she sent me some unschooling information, and then I also met with my local state officials, and then the school that we're working with, and they recommended to me that I put him and pull him out of the online school because I'm trying to get them to put him on like a medical pause.
Okay.
And they were like, well, we've seen in these circumstances where people just switch them over to a homeschool status.
hmm
And I thought to myself, well, hold on a minute, because I've already said I cannot homeschool him. He needs to be either in a program or whatnot. So their idea of unschooling is let's throw him over into this other category. But
hmm
in my mind, when you unschool, it's it's different for every child. Some kids you can unschool and they can't do anything for a while because they might be in burnout, but then you want to eventually introduce, foundation and classes and eventually so they can either test out or whatnot. Versus some kids, when you say unschool, they are are unable to ever return.
Hmm. So it sounds like your goal is returning, and like I'm reading into not only the question that you submitted, but what you're saying now. Would you say that's correct?
That would be, how do I say this? I don't, that would be my hope,
Hmm
because I'm because I hope someday we can get him to the point where he's self-sufficient,
Yeah.
that he I mean, I'm not going to live forever, right? So that's every parent's, nightmare, is worrying
Yeah.
about the future.
Yep.
So that's that's my biggest thing is, well, I mean, here's the thing, at the end of the day, like the minute, because he's not at that age where he can legally quit school,
hmm
they start throwing out things like, well, the state lawyers have to get involved. And it's like,
Yep.
give me a break. This is my kid, and so, and I'm not going to lie and say that I'm homeschooling him when he's not doing anything. I mean, I'm not saying he's not doing anything. We're just not doing any schoolwork right now. The focus is working on the behaviors and his health. That's the
hmm
priority.
hmm Okay, so let's start there. I think I want to initially say I don't have an answer, right? I don't have an answer like what are the chances your child returns later. Um, but Tyga, thank you so much for sharing this question. And really building on what you had shared in the forum, because there's a lot more pieces that, again, back to what I initially said, are really universal, and I've seen shown up in a bunch of other people's questions. So that's really helpful. Um, yeah, you're saying it looks different for everybody. The testing out, like, let's consider the low floor, the low bar for what is okay. Like, what if your child never goes back to school? Is that okay for you?
Um, yes. I mean, I'm not, several years ago, I had to give up the dream of college and, different things. And it doesn't mean that I've even given up on that because I think the brain doesn't stop developing until, children are in their 20s. So a lot can happen.
Mm,
And I didn't finish, I have a master's degree and I didn't even finish my bachelor's until I was in my late 30s. So,
okay.
you can get education and have a life change at any point in your life.
Yeah.
So I am not one of these parents that's like pushing a certain direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
I
so,
would go
you
ahead.
know, and I think our system is set up for that, and that's the pressure, right? Oh,
Hmm.
by law, they have to be attending school until they're 16 years and 9 months. Then
Hmm.
they can quit, and it's like, I'm not even saying I want him to quit. I'm like, can we just put him on a pause for a while until I can see what happens?
Yeah.
After we get out of burnout,
Yeah.
and in the meantime, yeah. So I'm kind of flexible. It could happen, it couldn't happen. I've, you know,
Awesome. Thank you. Um,
nobody can force anybody to do something that they don't want to do in my mind. And I don't think with these types of wonderful creative brains that we should ever try to push somebody a certain direction.
yeah. I think you have a lot of good things on your mind right now. And yeah, sure, some of this is difficult as well. And I totally I'm cognizant of that. I One thing, it sounds like you have like some deschooling that you've kind of done, and you're what you were just talking about. Like you can't push anybody to learn anything. You can't just fill students' head up, especially if they're not ready. I think that's really important. And it comes down to, for me, the difference between that like just in time learning versus just in case learning. I'm not going to say that one is the right way, but with unschooling, I think largely they err on the side of just in time learning. So unschooling is not, it's not necessarily no coercion. I think it's often said that way, but I think a better way, I was just talking to someone about this, a better way to explain unschooling is like consent based. Okay. Consent based in a way that school is not consent based. School is a lot more fear based. Like you have to do this, or there will be punishments, or you will have bad grades, or et cetera, et cetera. And I think living life in an unschooling way with unschooling children, um, is a lot more based on consent. Um, Before I go too deep into that, I want so one thing that you were saying was like testing out. And yeah, it just brings me back to that. Like your hope is that you get your son through this burnout and then they can jump back into the system that possibly burned them out, right? Um,
Well, that isn't, it can't look like it has.
okay, yeah.
Right. I mean, I worked with the current online program, and then I actually, like I said, worked with the state. I got approval to do a pilot program because I was like, the way you guys have things structured, this isn't going to work. Are you willing to think outside the box? And they were, and so I started using, thank goodness, some AI and developed a project-based curriculum off of something he was interested in. And
Hmm.
they were willing and flexible to kind of be the holders over that. So I don't have any expectations. I brought up the testing because that was one of the options. Like
Okay.
I literally sat down one day and was like, this isn't working, this isn't working. So what could we do? Think outside the box, you know? And so one of the things is we could eventually study and take the high set test. And you can do that at any point. Maybe he doesn't even do that until he's 20 years old and he changes his mind and decides he wants to go to college or
Hmm.
something. So that's an option. And then another option is maybe at some point we get qualified and we can do this pilot program and finish his education through a project-based curriculum.
Hmm.
So right now, those are my two main options. And then the third one is yes, we never complete any education from this point on.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Can we
Right.
get into some sort of trade without, anything if there's interest on down the line? So
Yeah.
I've kind of
Yeah.
pursued those three avenues because I never know which way it's going to go. It may be that he can't even work. The fourth thing in the back of my head is what if he never really can hold down a job? And then that's a fourth thing that I've been taking training on, what happens then and how does that work?
Yeah. There's this good podcast that I'm trying to think about what the name is, and I'll find it, and maybe what I'll do is I'll email it out. Um, but it's basically like what to do if college is not in the, like to figure out if college is for you, and if not, then what are the other possibilities? And I think that's important to not figure out what's going to happen in the future, but to understand what the options are. Because I think largely people don't really look at that. And especially Taga, where you're coming from of like, I'm not really sure even what high school is going to finish like. It's really awesome that you were able to work together kind of with the local, I'm not sure where you're coming from, but like school district or with the, I don't know, the educational authorities, if you will, to say, hey, let's try this project-based learning. Let's see if it works. Homeschooling, I hear what you're saying. Like, okay, I don't want to say that I'm homeschooling if I'm not doing anything, but I'm wondering, is the current project-based learning working for, like, is that helping be a safe place to recover from burnout? And I hope it's okay to share like a little of your question when you posted it was basically that you have a PDA autistic teen. I think that adds um, a helpful lens on like what your child is recovering from, like being in school. I'll say a few things first before you can jump back in, Taga, but um, I think in many ways the home should be the safe space, right? It shouldn't be the toughen up and prep for the real world space as much as that's weighing on our minds as parents is like, well, I'm responsible for helping my son get to be successful, whatever that means in your family. Um, I think this environment should look different depending on the young people's needs. Maybe, your young person is really flexible and can be pushed, and that's helpful for them. Maybe they need a little nudge here and there, or maybe they do just need the space to like, hey, let me kind of reconnect with myself, let me find joy again. Let me find what I'm interested in and go with it. And it kind of, again, Taga, it sounds like with the project-based learning that you're trying to go in this avenue. And I think that's awesome. Um, yeah, so what else do I have in my notes here? I don't know enough about PDA. I do know about PDA. I have worked with PDA students. I have worked with PDA children in homeschooling families. I'm from Pennsylvania and we have to do evaluation. So I've evaluated students with PDA. I have some PDA young people in the communities that I'm in. Um, and I probably also just have demand avoidance. And I know that those are different things, but I don't know enough about PDA to say that with healing, the demand avoidance will like improve to the point of a sense of normalcy. I don't think that's true. Feel free to call me out if if I'm wrong there. I just don't know that. So I don't know. if, a year or two, your child will be like, okay, let's do college now, or let's get our, I forget the term you were using for it, but in the US, it's like the GRE, basically a test to say you finished high school, or even just a test to say, hey, I'm ready for college. Um, I think again, I want to go back to like what's your low floor expectation is and really do some work around that. The work can look like journaling, it can look like talking about it with someone, it can look like therapy, it can look like doing art about it, it can look like holding on to it. But what that also means is that you kind of live in the uncertainty, and the more that you can be okay with that, the better you can be. This is a very uncertain thing that you're talking about. And to have a path to move forward, to know what you're doing is great. But sometimes what happens is we calm ourselves as parents by creating a path to move forward, and then we never check back in to say, like, hey, was that the best choice? Or we've been going this way for 2 years, and I'm meeting like a lot of, there's a bunch of struggles coming out of that. Is there a way to pivot that makes it less comfortable for me as a parent? Whether that is less comfortable, like physically in the space, or less comfortable mentally in terms of the mental load of being okay with it being uncertain. Unschooling is kind of uncertain, and to me, what you're saying about is homeschooling sounds uncertain too, especially, and it seems like almost a little immoral for you to say like, "Hey, I'm educating my child." But honestly, right now I'm not because it's a period of burnout, so I'm kind of lying. Um, the thing that one thing that I've really thought about with the low floor is, for example, I got to a point in my unschooling journey where my son, I think we were talking about the future, and my son, who's 12 now, was saying like, "Hey, you know what? I don't think I'm ever gonna drive." And I'm like, "Oh, buddy, you're gonna drive. You're gonna get your license." And I didn't say that, but that's what was going on in my head. And then I was like, "You know what? What does it matter right now if he doesn't think he's gonna drive?" And honestly, also in the future, what if he doesn't drive? And what if he never moves out of the house? What if he's always here? Is it so bad? Is that so bad? And I'm not saying that, I don't think that my son not driving or not moving out of the house, if that is what winds up being the case, implies that my son would not be learning, would not be figuring out the world on himself, would not be trying to do other things in a way that he wouldn't be prepared if my wife and I were to pass away. Um, Yeah. So I think there's a lot we sign on to when we choose to have children without really knowing it. And I think for me, this was another facet of like, if my son never moves out, is that okay? And for me, I was like, I like my son a lot. I like spending time with him. And sure, if he hangs around, maybe the bills are going to be a little bit higher, but maybe he'll have a job then too. But honestly, it's really hard to get like an apartment or a house these days, in the US at least. Um, so is that all so terrible? So just to kind of re-question what were our expectations, because sometimes, like I said, if we're pushing forward toward an answer like, hey, college would be amazing, amazing, but then to really think like, okay, well, college for what? And then how does that college ensure, or what are the, it's college is a gamble. How does it help ensure that my child would be winding up with a job or with a means of living or success or et cetera, et cetera. A couple other things that I'll throw out there. Casey Ehrlich has a really good podcast. It's called At Peace Parents. Or is it At Peace? Yeah, I think it's At Peace Parents. And that one is really awesome for PDA. I've listened to a few episodes and I've heard it recommended again and again. Amanda Diekman has the Low Demand Parenting. That's a book. Um, And then just finding places to connect with other PDA parents. Just a shout out because this is the community that I am in. The Mosaic Collective is a pretty good place, um, especially because we do have a lot of PDA families with PDA there and families with teens and families wondering about that like kind of launching stage, Taga, that's definitely on your mind right now. Um, so that's kind of what I have for my notes. But Taga, if you have anything else you want to bring up, I'm more than happy to hear.
Yes, I want to say thank you to you because you brought something up that over the past several months I have finally gotten to. In the past 2 years, it's the pressure. We've had some legal trouble from his behavior. So at first it was the state telling me what to do, and then it's the school telling me what to do. And it's like I've you affirm to me that I have ownership over what I want us to do as a team. So I've canceled therapies. I've taken meds away. We own our plan together. And so I appreciate you saying that. And you didn't say it in the same terms, but it it's okay for me to say this is what it looks like right now. Just because everyone else thinks it needs to look differently, it doesn't have to.
It's less comfortable that route because you have to, if you're a people pleaser, then you have to refigure out how to interact and relate with the rest of the world. And the rest, even if you're not a people pleaser, there's still a lot of outside influence coming in. And
Mhm.
even if it's not coming in right now, you kind of think what other people are thinking. Like, oh, they're judging me, or oh, they weren't so happy when they met. They must be thinking about my child. And all of these things creep in just from your own mind and how you were kind of schooled might be the word to think about the world and what's
Mhm.
okay and competition and getting ahead and et cetera, et cetera. And another thing that you were kind of dancing around there is one thing Akila Richards says in her book, Raising Free People. She says that there was a big shift in her mind when she went from being an agent of the school to being like an agent for her children, for her young people.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, parents that are leaving the school system, they still have that like, okay, well, let me do like we're not even in the school system anymore, but guess what? Curriculum or what does educational have to look like? Um, and I just want to throw out like school is not traditional. School is not traditional. School is conventional because that's what people do these days. But how long has it been around? What, like 200 years? So for the 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 long span of human like modern human life, which is what, like 50,000 years, there wasn't school and it looked a lot more like self-directed education and living in community. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, hey, go find your community, it's going to happen right now. Or, you need to be, I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. But I think in a lot of ways that conventional school puts these expectations on kids and their parents that are unnatural. Um, and just to question that, just to keep questioning that. Yeah. All right, Taga, thank you so much for your question. And if you have more, feel free to jump back into that form. I'll share it again and you can add more, whatever you want. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'll keep
Yeah.
listening.
Um, wow, that was awesome. I didn't expect it to take so long. Maybe just my planning. But that was really cool. I'm glad we could dive so deep into that one. Um, there are some very connected ones, and I want to maybe pull them out. Um, hmm. We had about 12, I think 13 at this point, questions that were submitted. Um, Yeah. Yeah, I think what I'll do is, Lynn, I saw that you joined as well. If you have something that's coming up for you right now, feel free to jump on, say a few words.
I don't have anything in particular, but I have a lot of things bubbled up from listening to you talk, and I don't know if it's okay to share them. Without being, it's a statement rather than a question, I suppose, is my
Go for it. Yeah.
thing. So I have PDA, so I have plenty of thing with it. But one thing I want to pass on is my experience with PDAs is if they really want to do something, get out of their way because they're going to do it. Um, there is no stopping them when they put their mind to something. Um, there is still learning while they're in burnout. So when a kid is home from school, my middle kid had bad burnout, and even the learning that they're doing at that stage, it doesn't look like education. It doesn't look like school. It's still a lot of learning, and it's learning things that they will know for the rest of their life. Um, so don't minimise how that feels. Um, Another thing that happened for my kid was he had burnout, and there was maybe a couple of months where he didn't go to school but could have went to school, and I didn't feel like he really started to recover from burnout until we took school totally away to say no, you're not going back until you don't have to ever go back. It was kind of then, because I think the expectation of I have to feel better because then I'm going back, it just kept coming back around. um The Unschooling Rules on Living Joyfully podcast was one that came to my head when you were talking about podcasts, because they talk about what the rules are of unschooling, and some of them are just nonsense, the things that you think it should be and it's not. I think that's a brilliant wee series, especially when the way you're talking, I feel like you'd get a lot from it. And the other one is if you're on this call because you got the bonus pack from the summit, you should have 30 days free with Weave, which is Melissa's community. And a lot of people on there have PDA, a lot of people on there have kids with PDA, but you've got 30 days and you could access loads of different resources and then leave. Like, you don't have to stay and pay, but it could give you loads and loads of information. So I wanted to make sure you could do all of that. And I know it's not for me to answer your question, but I felt like I had to say it anyway.
No, actually, before you
Thank
hopped
you.
on, Lynn, thank you so much. Before you hopped on, I was saying sometimes in conversation, the best answers arise, and I'm still trying to figure out this format. So I think that was really nice. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah, I think it's so hard, and I think especially when you do have parents who are also in Weave, everybody has kids who are neurodiverse, so we're all answering from that same place.
mm,
Whereas if your kid isn't neurodiverse, the plans that you can have are totally different.
hmm
Um, and it's good to know lots of different ways. But it's quite nice to actually get, oh, right, so you just say something like PDA and then people go, yes, I understand what you're talking about, without having to then explain what it means,
Yeah,
which is always hard.
yeah.
Um,
And
so, yeah.
thank you, Lynn. Thank you again. One thing I want to add is that when we design things for neurodivergent children, I think we're also designing them for everybody. It makes it easier for everybody because I think in specific, PDA children have a very like, I need to consent to doing this, right? So it makes the parents, it's a struggle. I'm not saying this is great. It makes things easier. I'm saying that when we are able to take the time and be flexible and design things for children with PDA, it makes us laser focused on that consent piece of it, which I think is honoring children in general. So thank you for that. And then I
Yeah.
also, Lynn, another thing that you brought up was what is the learning happening now? 100%. I love that. It's the it's invisible learning versus visible learning, and school often is looking for visible learning. What can come up? Hey, what's the worksheet? What do you get on your test? What's the project? But invisible learning is a lot less like you can't grasp onto it, and it only manifests kind of after the fact, sometimes 2 years down the road, sometimes 2 weeks down the road, where you're like, oh my goodness, you were zoning out watching YouTube videos, and now you can, astutely tell the difference between this kind of train and this kind of train. And you're wondering if train is in your career path, like something related to trains. Um, but not to say that, again, all invisible learning is going to lead you to a career path. And the emotional side of it, I think, is the most important. If we're talking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need to feel safe first. And burnout is literally you not feeling safe. And PDA burnout is exactly that child not feeling safe. So, Lynn, thank you so much. That those are really helpful additions.
Another one you got. See, we're going to just keep going back and forward now. Um, the neurodiverse designs that work for neurotypical, I think that's totally bang on. What I always find frustrating as a neurodiverse parent of three kids, what happens, what works for one neurodiverse kid doesn't work for the other one. And that's when you have lots of challenges around
Mhm.
that. And that's where makes it really interesting to try and figure out what
Mm.
works. But that when you take it down to the bottom baseline of autonomy and consent, that then works, which is great. One thing I remember someone saying to me is that you'll never see a kid having a meltdown who is 100% invested in their special activity or their special interest.
Mm.
If you're totally in on that, and I think that's part of the burnout recovery, getting into something creative or something hobby or something that's just for the joy of it
Mm.
helps with that burnout recovery.
Yeah,
Um,
I want to push back on that a little bit because I think there is a little bit of with autism, for example, it's possible you can be deep into your interests, but also because of you being so deep in your interests and like the monotropism is you get stuck there as well. And so that can be something where even though you need to eat something, even though you need to drink, even though you need to go to the bathroom, it's hard for you to leave or to transition. And there's also a bit of